Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Stageable State of the Stage podcast. My name is Benjamin Reed. I am the founder and CEO of Stageable.com, and this is the State of the Stage podcast where we discuss the reinvention of independent live performance as we head deeper into the digital era. So I'm here joined by Constance Swain. Constance, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled to have you, thrilled to see you. So you and I are close friends, but the people who are listening or watching may not know you or who you are. So would you just take a moment and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and what you're working on currently?
Yes. Hello, I'm Constance Swain. I'm really good friends with Ben Reed. I call him, he's like a brother. It's more than friendship. It's deeper than that.
It is.
I am a multi-hyphenate artist. I feel like you kind of have to be. If you're going to have any sort of sustainability in this career, you sort of got to do it all. You got to, really have your hands in a whole bunch of baskets. So started as an actor, was really interested in movement and fight choreo. So I've done that world as well, and then segued into directing, as well as voiceover. So I do a lot of voiceover as well. And right now what I'm working on, so I just finished directing Little Women for the American Shakespeare Center, which is currently running through April 19th. And right now I am directing a tribute to the late, great, iconic Nikki Giovanni for the Virginia Festival of the Book, which is happening at the Paramount Theater in Charlottesville. So that's what's going on this end.
Wow. So tell me about your journey breaking into directing, because I feel like that's something that a lot of actors and theater people aspire to do, but don't actually ever make the jump and make the leap. So tell me about how that happened for you.
Almost by accident, honestly. It wasn't something I sought out to do. I was like, whoa, how did this? I feel like I had like little moments of directing with doing fight choreography, because there's like elements of directing and storytelling and just taking yourself outside of the thing, and how it fits in my body is going to be different than how it fits in your body, and how we still tell the same story. So I feel like that was my introduction, but it wasn't something that I was really even aware of. And it was through doing a fellowship at Mary Baldwin University, which is in Stanton, Virginia, where I live, the McDermott Visiting Artist in Residency. And a part of that residency, I taught a directing class for the semester, and I directed the third year MFAs in their sort of final big hoorah production for the Blackfriars. And that was Night of the Burning Pestle, a show I had never heard of. It was wacky, it was crazy, and it was such a great time. And it gave me the bug. I think it was the first time that I really took a step back and thought, wow, is this what it's like to be able to have this amount of influence over an experience for a group of people? And man, if that's in the wrong hands, that can be awful. And if it's in the right hands, someone who is collaborative, someone who understands the other side of things and what it is to be on that side, there's magic. I mean, I feel like this sort of sky's the limits, and that's what it taught me. Yeah, getting into directing.
So, all right, I saw Night of the Burning Pestle, which was lovely. I mean, you're right. It was like wackadoodle, but it was also a great production, and you could clearly tell that the artists on stage were having a ball, and the audience was also feeding off of that energy and having a great time. So I actually got to be there and saw that show. But then you directed at Silverline and did one of my favorite plays, Art by Yasmina Reza. Yeah. And I am so angry for multiple reasons. Because one, I wish that I had been able to be directed by you and been in that play. And then two, I wasn't able to get to the performances just logistically. Yeah. And so I'd love to hear two things. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the play Art, and your experience directing that, and what you did with that show, since I wasn't able to be there. And then I want to ask you if you have had any experience with bringing live entertainment into a digital sphere, into a digital mode, so that people might be able to interact with it who aren't able to be there physically.
Oh man. Okay, great. Yeah, that uh so with art, it was another one of those shows that I had heard of. I think I'd even probably like watched scenes and maybe in grad school or in undergrad rather. But that was the bulk of my experience with it. No, there are no roles in it for me. It's three gentlemen friends, long life friends, um, and they. In a nutshell, they're hanging out for the first time in a long time. And one of the friends buys a piece of art. It is a white canvas that everything on it is white. The paint is white. Everything's white. So essentially, it's a blank canvas, and that's I guess, the sort of the joke of it all. And he has spent a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, like something that would be like the same amount as a house. I think was it 250. I think it was 250,000 that
Yeah.
he spent on it. Yeah, and a ridiculous amount of money. And his friends, especially one of the character Mark, who is the one who's really questioning. Oh, what is his name? Serge buys this
Mm-hmm.
painting, and Mark, who is sort of the person whose lens we experience the play through, starts to question, what is this guy doing? What's this about? Our dynamic, our friendship has changed. You were never the type to go off and be so pompous, and you're hanging with this crowd, and you're forgetting about me. And Mark, in our production, we it was an actor who was older, and so we wanted to lean into this idea of mentorship and what happens when the pupil outgrows the mentor. 'Cause it's a
Mm-hmm.
real interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing for you to feel like your friendship is, you're going separate ways because they're hanging with a new crowd or they've got a little more money than you, and so they're living a different lifestyle. It's different when, but I brought you up. You wouldn't be who you are without me, and now you've forgotten about me, and somehow I'm old fashioned, or I'm has been. And then there's a third friend, Yvonne, who is just sort of caught in the middle of it all. Just doesn't like confrontation. He's in the midst of planning a wedding that he really is not excited about, but is just like constantly being beaten up by life and these friends. And so the three of them get together to go out for an evening, and they never leave. They never end up successfully going out because they get roped back into this conversation about this piece of art. And it's under the guise of art, but the sort of the essence of what's happening is relationships, and who gets to decide who gets to decide in the same way what is art and then what is friendship. Because the
Mm-hmm.
question becomes, well, you've stopped being my friend. You're not a good friend to me. You've changed. You're different. And they keep bringing up this art, but really what they're talking about is we're not the same. And I we need to unpack this. And of course, they don't ever just come out and say they need to unpack it. They go all roundabout ways. And it's a play that is a lot about listening, and it's a lot about conversations, which, not that there weren't conversations happening in Night of the Burning Pestle, but Night of the Burning Pestle, I think, had 21, 22 people in it. So mayhem. It's a very different show.
Very different.
Whereas this one was very modern and very, we're sitting down and having these really deep conversations where I am challenging you. And as far as the audiences who got to come and see, which, by the way, was a limited run, so it's not even your fault. I think we only had like maybe four shows of it. The thing I wanted them to leave with was, well, what are the relationships that I'm holding a grudge? Where I haven't really told that person. I haven't really said the thing that hurt me, or made that connection, extended that olive branch, and do it because you don't know if you have tomorrow. It could be too late. So this
Mm-hmm.
idea that not to take relationships for granted, and to always be mindful that as you evolve, others evolve around you. And so sometimes you have to be, not sometimes, in any long standing relationship, being embracing the changes that happen with your friends, so long as they're for for their better, that they're not hurting them, so none of that detrimental stuff. But in terms of people really being able to extend their wings as far out as they reach, and that might mean they look a little different, but that doesn't mean that the friendship isn't true. So I think
It's
that
like
was,
that.
yeah,
They say that in relationships, they talk about growing together versus growing apart.
yeah,
Like both people are gonna be growing, and it's just a question of, are you growing with your partner, or are you both growing in opposite directions? And
yeah.
kind of extending that to friendship,
Hmm.
and the recognition that we are all constantly evolving, changing. The person that we were, you know, a week ago, a year ago, is not the person we are today.
Yeah. And you should have the
And
freedom to, because that's what I think
yeah,
happens in relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic or whatever, family, familiar, where it's like, but you've always been this way. You're supposed to be this way. And so the moment that you're not that, there's you're in question of your intentionality, your integrity. What are you putting on a front? Are you sort of like posh, high and mighty because you forgot where you came from? And that's, to me, I think, especially after a pandemic world, I feel like a lot of us in that time did a lot of reflecting, a lot of like fighting with some internal demons. Maybe, there was a lot of internal happening for everyone, that when you got back into the world and then seeing friends you hadn't seen since before the pandemic, not walking into this new chapter with an understanding that it is a new chapter. You're not the same, and surely they're not either, so let me reintroduce myself to you, if that makes sense.
yeah,
So that was in my mind a lot with art, this idea of reintroduction.
huh? That's super interesting. I love that, because that is, I was definitely my experience in the pandemic. Was like it it was like the ultimate, to do the Hamlet quote, like hold the mirror up to nature. It
Hmm.
was like it forced us all to take a real long, hard look at who we were in the mirror, and like, what have I been doing? Who am I now? Who am I in relation to this brand new event that's never happened before?
Hmm.
To for us, that's never happened in our collective memory. And then going back and reintroducing, and it's like we've all spent that time thinking about it and making changes and baking sourdough bread and whatever it
so,
is you did during the
so
pandemic.
many things got baked.
Yeah, so
Yes,
many things got
so
baked.
many things got baked.
But yeah, but then and then having and then so going away for a period, and growth happens and change happens, and you really look at yourself in the mirror and make adjustments, and then you get reintroduced back to your society, and it's like,
Hmm.
whoa, this is different now.
Hmm.
And I love that interpretation of that play, and I think it's super interesting, especially when you bring up the pandemic, and interesting to me because I love that play and I like, hearing what people think about it. So I want to bring it back to the second part of my question, and during you talking about the play, it reminded me of a past conversation that you and I had, which was you had referenced Jason Alexander from Seinfeld talking
Hmm.
about just about making art, and about how it's so easy to make excuses about making art, and he references how we all have the ability in our pockets with smartphones to make almost anything, and yet we don't necessarily do it.
Hmm.
And that has been something like, so I feel like we make it harder than it has to be to include the audience who can't make it in person.
Yeah.
Like we could literally open a laptop and a Zoom and invite the world. We could post it to social media, and it wouldn't be the best quality, obviously, but
But
we
it would
could
be,
do it.
we could do it exactly with this much money, because it's already there. We already have the tools. It's really not a
Yeah.
complicated thing. Yeah.
So
And art is supposed to be
is
accessible.
what is that about? Why do you think we make it harder than it has to be, is or deny the fact that we have the capabilities that we have.
Mm.
What's going on there?
What is going on there? I'm gonna answer this. I'm trying to find my answer. I was just talking with our friend Topher about this because I think he had read an article. Othello is on Broadway right now, and I think the cheapest seat is like $280 or something like that.
Yep.
And there was some feelings about, hey, these are supposed to be the nosebleeds. These are supposed to be the rush tickets. Two
Yeah.
hundred some odd dollars. When eggs are $6, $7 a dozen, something isn't computing. Like, what is this? And art is supposed to be accessible. So why are we sort of putting that gate up, that stonewalling people? And to your point of, we have all of these resources, why don't we utilize them? I think some of it is, in all honesty, like an old school way of thinking. I think what this industry needs is this. They need this next wave of people to come up and go, hey, but we got it right here. I think that there's a lot of, it's always been this way. This is how it's supposed to be. And I disagree with that. I think there's some things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's working, like, hey, it's a branding thing, and that's like a part of the brand, and it's always been, yeah, cool. But if we talk about art being accessible and we aren't doing everything in our power to make it so, then we contradict ourselves. And I think that a lot of it is, truthfully, I mean, I don't even want to say ignorance, because we're all aware that Zoom and all of these things exist because we all had to do them for, I mean, meetings still happen. For all so many Zoom plays that happen, so people made it work. They've been terrible. I can't tell you, I was so tired of attending and being in Zoom. I was like, no, no more Zoom plays. But it's like, okay, what did that information teach us? It taught us that we're actually more connected than we thought. Because when we
Mm.
weren't allowed to be in person, all national theater, I mean, the amount of content that theaters posted to make themselves accessible, which is, sort of was the presentation of it all. But now, and I know still doing that, but in terms of, by and large, it feels like that has been left behind. And I can't help but think, doesn't everything always boil down to money? Doesn't it all boil down to money always? It's like, we're in a capitalist society, so it's like, oh, if it's, yeah, yeah. I don't have a solid answer, but that's my thought. It's a bit, oh, this is where it's always been, and then, oh, if it's not making us a massive profit, then should we be putting in the effort to make it so? And I know that there are certain things like equity rules and all kinds of things to keep actors and artists safe and their image and likeness. I get that. I do. But we made all kinds of adjustments during COVID. So it
Mhm.
can happen. I just don't think that there are enough people wanting to push that envelope.
I imagine that, talking about profit, that the Othello conversation, like the reason those things are priced at that is one, I think it's because that's the price the product demands,
Hmm.
because of the names
The
associated, and
names.
the and I'm sure then what it costs to get those names involved, and in order for this thing to be profitable,
Right.
that's what they have to. That's what it's.
Then
It
then
can't
then
be
say that.
priced
Then say
something.
that.
Yeah.
It's because you gaslight us when you pretend like that. That's the thing, is like, we keep like, it's a form of gaslighting, even if it's unintentional, to not be forthcoming. I know you can't tell all the tea. You can't start spilling that information out, but I think that's where some of my frustrations and maybe others' frustrations come when it comes to accessibility of the art. Is that, if it is that, then simply say, check it with your lawyers, check it with whoever you need to, but that there is a reason behind this, other than, because we can, because folks, they're not putting those things together, and we can't expect them to. It's not their job to know the behind the scenes of, hey, it costs X amount to get this person, and we don't need to know the nitty gritty. But the thought of it being, okay, well, if it is going to be X amount, and then that means that you have to be within this certain tax bracket or whatever to just easily access this art, then is there anything else we could do for those who can't? And maybe there are. I don't know. Maybe they are doing stuff. I've not looked into it enough, but I think that there always needs to be a plan in place for it to be accessible, whether it's New York and you got A-lister artists involved, or it's a community theater in a town that no one's ever heard of. It should always be in the conversation of accessibility, because then art is a lie if it is not.
Yeah, that's great. And that's one of the things that I really like about moving live performance into a digital medium, because it is about inclusivity. It is about accessibility. Like there's in so many ways, right? So if I happen not to live in New York City, I mean that right there disincludes me from being able to go see Othello, because it's expensive to travel and stay in New York City. Or if you don't live in an urban area, and not only are you not in New York, there is no offering within your immediate area of any kind of live theater, live dance, live music. It's like, I live in a small town and there ain't nothing for miles. And so it excites me as someone who really loves in-person performance that we now have the technology to say, hey, if you can't be here in the flesh, we have ways to include you and bring you in. And obviously we still have to do more. I mean, I think that needs to be a piece of the puzzle, because as you and I both know as performers, that being there in person is always a much more transcendent experience than watching through a screen. But we need to make sure that not only are we bringing it in a digital medium, but that we're finding ways to bring people who don't have those opportunities into the cities, in to go see Othello and Denzel Washington and Broadway.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then everybody wins.
Yeah.
The art doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt the art, or it doesn't hurt the producers for more people to have seen their product, to have been exposed to their product. Wow, and whether that's in the digital form or they got to come in person or whatever. Yeah, I agree with you. That's what excites me about the work you're doing, is like, okay, and that's what I said earlier, of perhaps what it needs is somebody or somebody's the next wave of people to come and shake that tree and go, okay, we have done it this way, but what about this, and this? And I think that that's a big piece of the puzzle that has been missing, is that it takes a visionary, a new way of interpreting, what has been to what could be. And the folks who are in charge need to step aside, open up the table, be willing to have those conversations. And if they aren't, then you do what you're doing and you create the space. So I think that's the other thing too, is a lot of artists feel like, I got to wait for somebody to give me the opportunity. And that's what Jason Alexander was saying, is like, you don't actually. That we are we got, we all kinds of ways to create art, to connect. And it's a little bit on us if we don't do it. It's a little on us. We can't. Yeah.
At Stageable, we just got started in 2025, and we've done some live streams from the Green Room, and we've done some with the American Globe Center. But we've really just barely scratched the surface of what's possible, both for in-person and online. And I think the most exciting frontier for me is, can we do both, and can we do both well? Like, can we take care of a in-person audience and at the same time open this up to anybody in the world who wants to participate and get in the sandbox and play? Because there can be this intrusive element to the in-person experience when all of a sudden you've got different lighting, different tech, But here's the other thing. It's like, you were talking about this, and it's so true, and it goes with kind of the theme of this conversation when you talk about art and people who have changed and progressed and grew, and they're having to confront and face that. There are a lot of artists, I think, who aren't recognizing the fact that what's possible now via technology is changing with so much speed that it's like, we have this experience of what the Zoom readings were like during COVID for theater, and everybody has that reaction that you had of like, oh God, if I have to watch one more of these Zoom play readings, but it's like, even in 5 years, 2020 to 2025, the way the video looks on your,
What we're doing right
the
now.
upgrade, yeah, it's that you couldn't do something like this before, or if it itself is becoming more inclusive, like
Yes.
it's embedded in your iPhone. The iPhone camera is unbelievably more advanced than it was 5 years ago, and it's only speeding up. So part of the problem comes when people use outdated thinking for new problems.
Yes, yeah. That's exactly right. That's a good way of putting it. That outdate, because we now have technology that solves a lot of the things, or at least solve, or at least presents another option. There are more options. There are more avenues to take than there were in 2020. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. And just in these 5 years, and we can only imagine like what will 26 and 27 and 20, like another 5 years from now, what's that gonna look like?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so here's another thing that kind of excites me. I want to get your reaction to it, because you do so much
Oh
to,
God.
like, for your career. I mean, it's like you can't just be an actor, right? In order to earn a living, I think you listed at least 4 different activities that you're
Hmm.
kind of constantly working on in order to be a full-time artist.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I hope for when we talk about democratization of art and of theater and of performance is the online space gives people the ability to cut the red tape and go take their thing and take it directly to the marketplace,
Yep.
and then receive the monetary rewards of serving a lot of people, economically. And so
Hmm.
this is like a veiled way of saying, I don't know that we need the $4 million theater, annual theater budget, this $8 million annual theater budget. What we need is, 7 actors and a great playwright and a space with great internet. And all of a sudden now, instead of a team of 25, we've got a team of 7, and we're
Hmm.
not, and they're seeing the direct benefit of making the thing that people want.
Right, right, right. That's exactly right. Oh, that's a good, yeah, yeah, I agree. Because we've talked about this in pockets, over the last, some odd years of reimagining the structure. It's like, I mean, not to take jobs away from anyone, but in the thinking of new and the sort of how we move forward through the inventing something different, a different model. Yeah, that really is what you need, because if I think about theater, especially theater I've seen recently, live performances that I've seen recently, a lot of times it almost feels like it's being disguised by all the stuff. It's like sort of being weighed down by all of the spectacle, and then I go away and I go, but I didn't feel like I really connected. I didn't really learn anything. I don't really feel like I was transported. It was like, okay, yeah, the costumes are pretty and all. I mean, all these things were happening or whatever, but I didn't care.
Mm.
I wasn't really invested in this story. And so yeah, it's sort of like challenging this notion of like, what if you got back to the nitty-gritty of it all, like really bare bones minimalist? Like, what do you actually need for this to be successful? What do people want? And at bare bones minimum, and even if you think about like Netflix and any of that stuff where it feels like there's options to ad nauseum of just like, man, there's so much you to consume, but the things that get consumed are excellent acting and excellent storytelling. Excellent writing, base at base. And of course, directing all of that. But the base of it is the story and those who carry out the story. And when we talk about what we're doing, it's like, what have we sort of deviated from that? Because now in our efforts to stay relevant, we kind of keep putting stuff on it. It makes sense. Like, you just like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like bog it down, and maybe people won't know that we haven't addressed this, or maybe we have to do these things to stay relevant. And nah, man, I think in staying relevant is give me something to care about, and then take care of me while you do it. Like,
Well,
which is exactly what you're saying in this, like how we care for our audiences. And it's we have the technology. Yeah, we can give them the show, and then we can give them the behind the scenes. We can give them these conversations, which if I'm an audience member, that enriches my experience, because I feel like you took me you're taking care of me. You're thinking about the fullness of the experience. And that's a word that often gets forgotten, I think, in specifically, say, like live theater, is the experience, the beginning, middle, end experience of it all, you know?
yeah, I love that. Yeah, it made me think like we could easily, you just finished directing Little Women, and we could easily have taken an audience member on a journey that's like social media post about the fact that it's happening, and then a conversation, this whole conversation we could do 45 minutes to an hour just unpacking your experience directing Little Women, what that play is about, the sort of central themes, what did you find that was challenging, what came naturally, and all that stuff. And then it could culminate in going to see the show itself, just thinking from a user perspective, right?
Yeah. Because we do that already with like actors on actors, and all of this, the sort of conversations of when actors are going around, or artists are going around promoting their big thing that's coming out. We tune in because I want to know the person. I want to know the process. How did you transform from this to this? Especially if it's
Totally.
someone who is sort of like hot on the scene right now. Like, I think a lot of Coleman Domingo, and I'm obsessed with Coleman Domingo in every interview he gives, because it's one, he's a brilliant artist, a brilliant performer, but I have fallen more in love with this artist because of the person that I feel like I've gotten to know in the medium of getting to watch interviews and getting to, the behind the scenes. And so that makes me more invested, which, for some people it's like, oh, the more invested I am, and we're talking about capitalism, because you got to, right, monetization. The more this, the more willing I am to go, oh, I was taken care of. I'm coming back. And not only am I going to come back, I'm going to tell my homie, you got to know about this, because I was taken care
Yeah.
of. They'll take care of you too. Because surely people who enjoy these things are surrounded, or at least have folks in their circle that also enjoy these things, because you are who
Yeah.
you hang with. And we know that better than any marketing scheme that ever was, word of mouth will never be touched, because I take word of mouth personally when my friend says, you got to watch this show. But, oh, okay, I'm going to watch that show.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That personal element is so important, and creating the sense of relationship and community. I mean, you were talking about getting to know people, and then, that invests you more in them, and you want to continue down that kind of relational path.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking about, have you seen Wicked?
Yes.
I mean,
Hmm.
amazing, right?
Yeah. I
And
mean, yeah.
And
There are no.
specifically, Ariana Grande, Lauren and I have had conversations about just how spectacular she was in that role.
Yeah.
And I heard that she spent a lot of time prepping, not just for the audition, but once she got the part, really working on the craft, working on acting and the craft. And
Which.
I'm sure she'd so like I would love to learn about what she did to prepare for that,
Hmm.
to deliver that performance that she did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in agreement
No,
all
you're right,
around.
because they also like sung live, which is unheard of. The fact that they were singing live, which only heightens the and we already know that in the film television world, time is money, so we have
Yeah.
this much time to shoot da 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 da, and we got to use sunlight da da da. I mean, there's so many elements that go, especially with something as massive as a Wicked, that they then took it the next step and said, well, we are going to bring in this theatrical element by having these iconic beasts of humans sing live. I want to know that story. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Mm,
Like what, because that's different. It's one thing to like, oh, we did the recording and I did it 3 times through, and like that's the one we went with, and I'm lip syncing to it the entire time, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that they had that very unique component, and then had the product they had at the end is just, I want to know that story.
yeah, yeah. It's like
Yeah.
give me as much as you got because I'm ready. Yeah,
Everything. I want to know everything from everybody.
yeah.
Because it's a massive, and I think people often forget because we give credit, and obviously you should, to Ariana and Cynthia. I mean, they're carrying this show, but thinking about like all of the folks in the background, whether that was the actors, the supporting roles, and then when you think about the people who made this world come alive, I know they get their flowers and acknowledgement if they're nominated, and they were, but for like the Oscars, with costumes and set design and light and all of that. But I want to know that story. If I'm and with what you're saying and what Stageable is doing, is it's looking for every opportunity to show you how this thing comes together. Because how cool is it to get this sort of VIP pass, and
Hmm.
you get to see you get to lift the carpet and see underneath how it all went down. That's cool. And then when I get to go
Yeah.
see the product, I go, oh yeah, I remember when I saw that shot and they were talking about this very moment. And Cynthia was so nervous about when they lifted her up and flying, but then she just,
Yeah.
that definitely makes it a more personal experience.
And that's what I really am interested in at Stageable is fostering that creation of community.
Hmm.
And so in circles, right? So like in a larger circle being Stageable could be a home base for people who love the performing arts and who, you go there to find new things, to discover new projects, to engage with projects you've already decided that you love.
Hmm.
But then on a smaller basis, like on an individual basis, so like if there was a certain theater company that you had already had an experience with and they were on the platform, then using that as a way to engage with them on a more frequent basis, right? So, like one of the things that I noticed that I thought was it was a problem I saw as an entrepreneur, which was that the typical value offering of live performance is you come to where we're doing the thing and buy our expensive ticket, and then we've got nothing else for you throughout the rest of the year. It's like so if you're not in town, wherever this stage might be
Yeah.
located,
Yeah.
that's it, right? We're asking you to travel to us to see our thing, and we'll see you next year, or we'll see you in 6 months. And I'm like, man, can't we come up with more ways of bringing value into people's lives than just
Yeah.
you come to us and buy our tickets? We're already doing so much more, right? There's rehearsals and there's meetings and there are talkbacks and there's first
Mhm.
read throughs and we're doing educational work on the side, and it's like I think there's more going on here that people from a distance would love to engage if
Right.
they were afforded the opportunity to do so.
Right. Right.
You know?
And in the theater too, I feel like it's always the actors, directors, they get the bulk, they get the flowers, but there's so much that goes into making it run.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And that community building. And I feel like oftentimes those other departments are overlooked, and it's not even intentionally, it's just sort of the way our industry is that, oh yeah, people fawn and hum and ha over the actors, and they want to hear all of that, which, okay, great, that good, but there, what if you got to experience these other things that make it come to life? Yeah. And yeah, you were just saying the making it available year round or as often as possible, and I just thought, like, you guys are getting ready to go to Disney, right? Imagine if like the only time you got to interact with Disney was when you went to Disney World or Disneyland, you
Right.
know
Right.
and I guess in this case it would just be one, because if we're comparing it to a theater where it's like one building, you got to go to that place in order to experience the thing, and you experience it, and you get t-shirts, and you get food, and you get to experience the rides and all that. But if that was the only time you got to engage with anything Disney, I don't know that Disney would have so much of a following, that people would be so invested, so willing to build their entire vacations around an experience of incorporating Disney at the, the sort of like center of it. And you think about that, if I think of like the American Shakespeare Center, which is a place you and I both know very well, and there are so many people who sort of make coming here a destination. But imagine if there was that other component of, yeah, but we stay connected all year round. There's
Yep.
you couldn't get enough of us when you came, and now like we're in your pockets. We're right there. Yeah. It's so simple, and yet it's so, but simple is often beguiling, and it's genius. I really do think it's genius.
All right. Well, we only have a little bit longer, so I feel like we need to
Should we talk
find a
about it?
new topic. Well, I wanted to get back to what we were talking about in the pre podcast,
Oh, yes,
chit
yes,
chat that
yes,
we were doing, because I
yes.
was telling you that in starting this podcast and in starting this company and just anytime I've done anything entrepreneurial, we own a couple of restaurants, and every time there's this frustration because you're trying to do something that's beyond your capabilities, and so we were talking about that and how that can make you feel like an imposter and dealing with imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome is so real. That's the part that nobody talks about. Everybody always is like, Instagram is like highlight reel. So I sort of think about it like, yeah, this is the highlight. This is like me at my best, me looking my best, and nobody talks about this part. So pursuing the arts, or like a life, entrepreneur, it feels a little bit like, oh, I could never, because it's supposed to be seamless. It's supposed to be easy. Or at the very least, I'm supposed to have success. I put in the work, it must then be successful. That's not true. It's all kinds of dips and turns. And as far as imposter syndrome, I mean, I think that really hit me, in particular, coming into Little Women, actually. I don't know that I felt it as viscerally until I got into Little Women. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, why am I having this imposter syndrome? And I'll be honest, I feel like nobody understands imposter syndrome to the degree that Black women understand imposter syndrome, because there's so very few examples of someone before us who, not to say that there's never been a Black woman who's directed at ASC. I know that there have been, but even that number is few, far, and in between. But
Mm,
in my own experience of being on the other side of things as an actor in a rehearsal room, 98, 99% of the time, that person was the opposite of me in some form or fashion. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not like discrediting those artists, but what I am saying is that uh, imposter syndrome comes when it is like anti, or anything that is opposite of the pattern that you've seen. Whether it's like you
mm,
examine in your own life, I've never done this, so then I must not be suited, capable of doing this thing. And then you add that element of, and I've never seen anyone like me doing this thing. So really, it must. I mean, I don't know how I ended up in here. How did I? Was it a mistake? Did they know who
right.
they've hired? And Little Women was in particular super imposter syndrome to me, because I didn't know nothing about no Little Women. I know nothing about it. There's tiny women running around. I know nothing about them Little Women. And I felt very like, I even, when the offer had come to me, I went back into them and I said, "Hey, you show you know who you asking? I don't know anything about these tiny ladies, um, and I know as much that it is a cult. Essentially, he's got a cult following. He's not calling it a cult,
Mm,
but it's got a cult like following. People are passionate about all these Little Women, and they should be. I get it, but that was not my experience, and I felt like, because I was so much on the outside looking in, I couldn't have been uh, suited for this. It's like one thing to feel uncomfortable directing, and it's another thing to be like, oh, I'm directing in a place where I've only been an actor. And I've
Hmm.
always been an actor, and I've had, whatever those hodgepodge of experiences are. And then now I'm all of a sudden in charge of a play and a story I don't know nothing about. And everybody else knows so much about it. And then I started to really interrogate that, like, okay, so you don't know anything about it. Why don't you know anything about it? And the question when I asked myself that, I thought, okay, well, you don't know anything about it because every time you've seen any iteration of this, nobody like you was in it. Why would you think that was for you? Which I think is a lot of black folks and black and brown folks experience with classical theater, is that, oh yeah, I've not seen myself in here, so I obviously don't belong. So I just don't pay attention to that. I pay attention to other things. And that was a wall I had up for a little bit when it came to engaging with this story, because I was just like, man, I watched all three movies. I watched terrible iterations that were of the musical that were free on YouTube. I mean, I listened to the book. I did all this sort of digging, and I was like, I have to figure out why I should care. I need to know why I gotta care, because otherwise I can't direct it. I need to know. I with art was not something I ever saw myself in, for obvious reasons, because I'm not well, obvious. I am not a man and do not identify as such. And I felt like, yeah, that's not my story. But I do understand when you outgrow a friendship, or when friendships are at a crossroad, when I could really sort of nail down what is this story about in my eyes, then we can lean into that. And so when I really started to interrogate this, I was like, okay, I understand. I get it. I get, and I see where people have misstepped, in my opinion, based on the iterations that I had seen of Little Women. For example, especially being in Stanton, Virginia, there, anytime they talk about the war, they always sort of like, oh yeah, that war that's going on in the background, but they never really spent any time on this war, the deadliest war that took place on American soil, it's a civil war. So it's not just any war that's happening at this time. And how dare I think that I can have a diverse cast where Meg is a black woman, Beth is an Asian woman, and not have a conversation about this. What does that mean in our world? And it's not to say that it becomes the world, but it is to say it must be a part of our narrative and layered in, sort of woven into the fabric of this story. Otherwise, we're lying, in my opinion, because I feel like I've been in a number of shows where it was sort of like checking a box, whether that was the intention or not. It felt like checking a box. Okay, you're playing this role, but we're not having a conversation about what you and this vessel means in this, Jane
Yes.
Austen play. It's different,
Yes. Yeah.
and I wanted to make sure that that was provided. And so, as far as the imposter syndrome went, the thing that I really latched onto was, okay, I might not feel all, like, I might not have all the answers. I might not be the smartest in the room on this subject. There are people who have more experience with this than I do, et cetera, et cetera. And great, yes, awesome. Let us collaborate to build this together. But the thing that I do know is how to story tell. Or tell a story, excuse me. I know how to tell a story, and I understand what makes me care about a story. And if the point is to engage people who have not seen themselves in this story, well then I'm that audience. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps I am the best person for this, because anyone else who's going to come and see this, they already have their preconceived notions, or they're part of the fan club, so they're coming in already rooting for the story, already invested in the story. But for those who don't know it, for whatever reason that might be, I've got to give them a reason to latch on and see themselves and care.
Yeah.
And that really helped to ease that imposter syndrome, because then I started to build, along with the artists who were involved, build the story that really felt universal, that we don't just, it's not that we just have a variety of shapes and sizes and colors up here to sort of say, oh look, we look just like you up here. But no, we're telling your story in here, so that when Professor Bear, who is a black man with locks, intentionally made sure the casting went that way. When it said, oh, when he was a professor in Germany, in Munich, he was a tenured professor. He had all this, but now that he's here, no one's going to hire him on account of the accent. It's a difference, and I don't know that anyone else would have caught that. I think it would
Yeah.
have just been something that would have been glazed over, even if the same actor was cast in that, but because I'm on the outside looking in, I was able to communicate to the performer, the actor who was had that line, who also is a black woman. Hey, there's subtext there. What does that mean? And so it was been really nice to go back and listen to the audience respond to those things that maybe they had never considered before. And so all the way back to that imposter syndrome question, the thing that really helped to settle my nerves was, I said, one, it begins with you. Can't nobody fix this. This is not like an external thing that someone's going to come to you and say, but Constance, you shouldn't feel like an imposter. They could, but that doesn't change the internal conversations I'm having with myself. What I had to do is go, okay, identify it. What makes you feel like an imposter? Okay. What can you change about that? And once I identified, okay, what I can change is I need to craft this story to make sure that it is actually inclusive. And that starts from the conversations I'm having with these artists. Before we even get to the text, no, let's talk about what it means that you're in this story. And how did the March family come to have these two sisters who don't look like the others? And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, I used your family as an example, because I know that you have a family that has truly, I adore your family. But the thing that I pointed out was that, when it comes to adoption, and when it comes to, at least in my experience of your family, that no one ever pointed and said, this is the adopted sibling. It's no, this is my sibling. And I'm in this vessel, they're in that vessel. And I understand that in this world, I'm perceived this way because I'm in this vessel, but I'm fully aware that that person has a different experience than me. And I can't change it, but I need to know about it. And I need to do everything in my power to make sure that I'm not perpetuating anything negative against them or anyone who looks like them different from me. And that was a conversation that we had in terms of the building of this. And that just, I don't know, just being able to pull from those examples and share that with the cast, and it be something that was concrete, it felt honest, and it is honest.
Yeah.
That was very
Well, it's like, no,
that.
that's great. I mean, there's so many things that bubbled up for me for people who don't know. And if you're watching this, looking at me, how would you know? But I have a sister who's black, who was adopted. So she's always been my sister. And I learned later in life to use to say was adopted, not my sister is adopted, but it's like, no, she was adopted. And now that is done and over. And now she is my sister. But it's so interesting because you look at this vessel and, you would not think I have a black family member, but I do. And so I loved all that you were talking about there, and especially the reference of the German professor and that he can't get work because of a German accent, and what having a person of a different skin tone in that role does to the audience when they hear that line, and how it changes it. And I think that's so poignant and interesting. And it made me think of, I had the same conversation after we saw Wicked about a black woman in the role of Elphaba, because it was initially Idina Menzel, who is of a different skin tone than white, but having that, this witch who is green, and that being such a big part of the storyline, and then to have a person of color in that role. And so then when they're talking about green, now I'm thinking in different terminology, and like, oh, people don't like her because of her green skin. And it's like, oh man, okay. And the thing is like, we just have to recognize that it does something. We can have different feelings about what that does, or if it's good or bad or right or wrong, or
Yeah.
but the point is that it has an effect. And
Yes.
and then the other thing that kept coming up for me as you were talking is like, I think sometimes we forget the spectrum of universality and diverseness. And it's like, it's a spectrum, and I think maybe better would be like the yin and yang of those things, in that like, if we recognize the fact that we have different backgrounds, skin colors, cultural traditions, religions, all that stuff, if we recognize that and then approach a story and go, okay, but even in spite of our differences, are there universal truths, which you alluded to about like, but I have experienced some of these things. You know, it's
Hmm.
like we need to utilize diversity in order to in order to help us understand what is universal, and vice
Yes.
versa. Use universality to help us understand that even though we've all experienced things like hope and pain and you know
Hmm.
but that there are specifics that make us different, and
Yeah.
celebrating that in its entirety, in the
Yes.
complete picture of both.
Yes, I totally agree. And for me, I mean, the only reason that I want to see or experience or have anything to do with a sort of reimagining or recreation or retelling of something that has been, right? Like there have been, we don't need no more Little Women. All them Little Women been had, Wicked. But if we use that story as an opportunity to question, to challenge, to unite, to like, to really start a new conversation based on things like universal, what is universal. When we use the play under new circumstances, to me, that is the only time I care to see a classic again, because it's like a
Mm.
classic is a classic, but a classic like a Shakespeare remains with us because it's what is universal about it. That Hamlet could be any hue, any gender, any vessel, but that consistently we understand that Hamlet experiences heartbreak and confusion and all of these internal struggles that you're not supposed to talk about a lot, but we all experience. Like that's the thing that makes a Hamlet relevant from here to the rest of time. And the
Mm.
same is true of Little Women or Wicked. And if artists are looking for opportunities, really trying to hone in on, yes, this is the story, and what else can we say about it right now that makes people go, I didn't think about it that way. I knew Alphabet was green, but when you cast Cynthia Erivo, we go, so they don't
Mm.
like her because she's green. And the like you said, we don't have to. It doesn't mean it needs to be kumbaya. We all got to be in agreement, but that what we challenge the audience to do is to rethink the way they've come to know this story, because
Mm.
there are people who feel like, I know this story through and through, I understand. But the moment you change something like casting and you put a different vessel in that place it's never been, people go, oh, wait, I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, yeah. And I think that that's just really important as we talk about the classics and how you keep classics relevant. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of people don't feel seen or a part of classics because classics are also incredibly exclusive. They are, and until we make it not, so that to me was such a great experience and a big light bulb that went off with Little Women, is the opportunity that we all had to come together and to not shy away from, try to disguise, try to like sweep under the rug our differences, but no, okay, this is the casting, great, so how does that inform the story? What does that mean
Mm.
now? And doing our due diligence with our research. Is there anything we can find to support this story? And that's something that we found too. The playwright Erin Riley, she was awesome, and she had done all this dramaturgy work and had shared with us that I think there's an article, excuse me, an article that it's like 95% sure that the Alcott's residence was a stop on the Underground Railroad. That was something that she discovered. So when we
Wow.
went to discuss with these actors, what does it mean for Meg to be Black and for Beth to be Asian, and how did they come into this family? We could say with some certainty, it's very, especially with Little Women being based off of Alcott's family, that it's very likely that they would have come across these children at at young age and have taken them in because their families could no longer provide for them, or it was too dangerous for them to take this child with them, so no, we'll keep them and we'll raise them as our own. And when you have those conversations, then we get to incorporate deeper, layered, honest levels where folks in the audience in 2025 go, that's my family. I've never seen
Mm.
my family portrayed that way, where someone like you can come and go, No one knows people wouldn't look at me and know that I have a black sister, and I do. And I know I'm like them. That's my family,
Mm.
and that's because family is also universal, but also diverse.
I love that you used the external of the casting and the diversity and you brought it back to the storytelling, and that it always comes back to telling the story,
Hmm.
and that this we're going to utilize this to help us tell this story in a new way, in a better, in I don't want to say better, but for us the best way
Hmm.
that we can tell this story. I love that, and I think that's such a that's when it can really connect, when it's like the bat meets the ball, as
Yeah.
opposed to when we do it because okay, we're ticking boxes like you said earlier, right? We're just going to do this and okay,
Yeah.
but box ticked
Yeah.
and now we're just going to do our thing. It's like no, we need to connect it back and utilize it to do
Yeah.
to serve the audience the best way that we possibly can.
Yes. Serve the
Yeah.
audience as best you can. Serve this story. Serve this cast. Do the best way you can. Because I cannot tell you how many times I have felt that checked box.
Yeah.
Okay, she checks that
Yeah.
box, whether it was intentional or not. And asking the questions I would ask, and it was, we don't really have time for it, or that's not the story. The story is this, and I get that, but you can't change that this is the vessel. And
Yeah.
to me, when you have those conversations, all you do is you just deepen the story, and you make it more enriching for those who get to experience it because we've thought about that. And I know that as a performer, there's nothing worse than feeling like you're in like five different plays because we didn't talk about these things that are really supposed to be sort of cemented, concrete. And when we as a cast or we as a company agree that this is what our production is saying,
Yeah.
no one can stop us. Then we're all in agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. Constance, I feel like if you would let me, I could have a 4.5 hour long podcast. I feel like we could just keep going and
We can
going
keep
and
going.
going. It means
Yeah.
that we're going to have you back on in the future so that we
I would
can
love to.
have more conversations about more stuff. But I
Mhm.
want to thank you for being on the podcast and for having a conversation with me. I love all of our conversations about theater and art. So thank you.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you can learn more about Constance. Do you have a website we can point people to?
Do. It's constanceswain.com. You can find out all my stuff.
There we go. You can follow along constanceswain.com, and I'm sure that we'll find some stuff to work on together. So you'll probably see Constance at stageable.com as well. Thanks again, Constance, and thanks everybody for being with us. And we will see you next time on Stageable State of the Stage.
Thank you.